Welcome everybody this morning to my talk, The Next Level in Leadership is Growing You. And so I am a business coach. I work with, a couple of different types of groups. Number one is with the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. I work with leadership teams of small to medium-sized businesses. And as an individual coach, I'm really working with driven entrepreneurs, executives, professionals looking to level up what they're doing with their lives. And of course, in all of those conversations, the topic of being a leader and leadership comes up all the time. And I know, there's only been about 1 million books written about the subject. I'm not going to add, any more books to that pile, but I want to, the purpose of my talk today is to really kind of relate some of the things that I've been learning in my career and in my life, and particularly also the work that I'm doing as well. And, as we've sort of been talking about coaching, for myself, I've been going on a revolutionary journey over the last year with a coach. And I want to share some of the things that I've been learning in that experience, which are pretty amazing. So I do want to acknowledge you all for being here today. Not everyone chooses to spend their time, looking at the subject of leadership, and particularly as I had in the title, like growing you, right? To the idea that it might actually reflect back and something that you can do to grow yourself as a leader. So putting the time aside, I want to honor you and acknowledge you for doing that. I think that's great. Hi, Rob. Nice to see you. Welcome. And in terms of what my objectives are for today, I want to sort of create the possibility that what you're going to learn here could change your life forever. I know that's a bold statement, but I've experienced incredible changes for myself over the last year, so I know that I can say it with confidence. I'm going to talk about ideas that you really can apply straight away, simple, practical tools that I know can make a difference. And as I said, I know they make a difference because I'm using them myself in my life. And the second outcome is, if anything I'm talking about with, today resonates with you, I'm going to give you the gift of a 1-hour coaching call, and I'll be happy to give you the details of that at the end of our call today. So I am going to start off by sharing my screen. All right, where is everything gone? Sorry, I'm just getting all of the text set up here again. All right, so launching in on next level in leadership. So I had a really cool and interesting start to my career designing multi-million-dollar racing yachts and building and coaching teams to help our clients win some of the world's most demanding yacht races. And I really learned a lot in those early years about what it took to be a great leader, right? And about the incredible importance of processes and systems. But I really developed a deep passion and curiosity about what it took to build a really great team. I was on some amazing teams. We did amazing things, winning round the world yacht races. But I was also on some teams that didn't make it, despite having the resources that we needed. I've even seen a $5 million racing yacht broken in half and about to sink beneath the waves because of team dysfunction. I also spent 16 years rising to become a leader at the top yacht design company in the world. We grew that business from 10 to 22 staff, which was big for a yacht design business. But then I found myself at the top and kind of no way to really learn more. So I made a very difficult decision. I made a decision to leave that business, went into government contracting in Washington, D.C. I became a PMP certified project manager, learned how to manage multi-million-dollar budgets and much larger groups of people, and helped the US Navy launch ships into the fleet. Then about 9 years ago, I decided it was time to get back to my entrepreneurial roots. So I founded my own business around my mission and passion to help people and teams and businesses get unstuck and sail forward. Along the way, I was introduced to this book called Traction and this system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I immediately fell in love because here at last were the tools I wished I'd had back when I was faced with obstacles trying to grow the yacht design business. So fast forward to today, I am running a thriving EOS practice, and I am also executing an individual coaching practice as well. And in both of these, I am working to, help my clients be able to elevate and transform their lives and their businesses, so they're frankly never going to be the same again, for their greater good. And within those businesses, also working to create openings for leaders to be able to step up into their zone of unique ability. So their lives are never going to be the same again. And then those leaders, seeing those leaders being able to create environments in those businesses where people are on the same page, seeing the same things, wanting the same things, a thriving work environment where their people can be inspired and their lives are never going to be the same again. So to enable this miracle of transformation, I am creating a sacred space on our farm here at Sweet Earth Orchard, where my clients are going to be able to come and get reconnected. And reconnected, I mean, reconnected with themselves, what's going on inside, reconnected with each other, and get grounded with what's going on in their lives and in their businesses. So it is a place of peace and calm, yet it's filled with nature's wonderful, creative, abundant energy. This life-giving water. So in this picture, you can see a little lake at the bottom of the screen there. But we have views of lakes. We've got the earth that we're regenerating, and then cooking healthy, growing healthy food, and then cooking it and serving it to people that come here. And then ultimately, too, in all of that, we have our lovely 14,000-foot mountain, Longs Peak, keeping her loving, caring watch over us as we do the sacred work of building better lives and building better businesses. So this is what's inspiring me, and this is what I am creating at the moment. As a little sort of side note update, this is a greenhouse that we've been building, a passive solar greenhouse. So it uses the sun's energy to be able to, create an environment during the winter that we're going to be able to grow food year round, which is a difficult thing to do here in Colorado. The way it looks inside, it's still being finished. So on the left-hand side of the screen is the south side. That's the sun comes in there. The right-hand side of the screen is the north side. On the northern side, there are tubes that are buried 10 feet down on the ground. They're 250-foot long tubes. And because we use the property, the fact that the ground stays at 52 degrees all year round. And so we can take the hot air out of the greenhouse in the summer and pipe it down into these tubes, and it comes up lovely and cool at the other end of the greenhouse. So we can use this passive solar system to be able to regulate the temperature year round. Eventually, this is not our greenhouse, but eventually we hope it's going to look like this when we get it all, get planted out. But we're making progress. The electricians are actually on site and installing things as I speak right now. So we are really nearing the end of the construction on that. We also have started a project to build a barn structure on the farm, and then the top level with those windows that's showing you, this is where we're going to have meeting rooms, and this is where I'm going to be creating the sacred space in terms of where I'm bringing my clients into the farm. So I have a general contractor coming this afternoon to kick that project off. So lots of exciting things happening. A couple of weeks ago, we hosted our first farm-to-table experience. We had a group of nurses came, visited the farm, talks, and then fed them a farm-to-table lunch. So one of the learnings we got from that was it's hot here in Colorado. The sun is brutal when we're out. So I had to create a lot of shade where we could keep a group of people, at a reasonable temperature and have them actually listen to what was going on and connect with each other. So a lot of things have been happening to create this sacred space that we're working on here. But, the subject of this talk is about leadership. And, as I want to sort of go back to the beginning of my career, right, to sort of talk about where it all started in terms of lessons from yacht racing. And as I, said in the introduction, there's been about 1 million books written about the subject of leadership. What I'm really focusing on is my personal experience and the work that I do with my clients. So I started off, my first job out of college was sailing on this boat. It was called Fisher and Paykel New Zealand, because it was sponsored by Fisher and Paykel, which is a whiteware manufacturing company. This boat was built to race around the world in what was then known as the Whitbread Round the World Yacht Race that goes from England all the way down through the Southern Ocean back up to England. So I started working for this team straight out of college. And so I went from studying engineering to being at the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning and, lifting weight off the floor to get strong enough and fit enough to be part of this sailing team. So I really got to experience, that, like creating the culture around the team and what that was like. And then ultimately, once we launched the boat and started getting it ready to sail around the world, that experience of a team coming together, trying to form a team, people sort of coming in and out of the team. And ultimately, unfortunately for us, the skipper and his number two on the yacht, after a year of sort of being together, ultimately found out, that they were not on the same page about how they were taking the team forward. And so just before the race was actually about to start, we had this massive change in the leadership in the boat. So I got to sort of really experience, tangibly day in and day out, just how difficult it is to build a really great team and the challenges of being a leader in a boat. So I didn't end up sailing around the world. I helped them get that boat ready all the way up to the start of the race, and then I was very fortunate to be able to actually come to the US. I'm from New Zealand originally, and come to the US and started a career designing, the sailing boats. And so this is a little bit of a grainy picture, but this is sort of one of my favorite teams that I ever worked with in a round the world yacht race. So we worked on all sorts of different Grand Prix, top flight racing projects. But this particular group, which was called Elbrook Racing, they were actually a German team, but sponsored by a German company. Obviously, usually these teams are very international teams from all sorts of different countries. So this Elbrook team won the Round the World Yacht Race, the Volvo race, very, very convincingly. And, I was really loved seeing that result at the end of having worked with them for such a long period of time, because they really stood out to me. They stood out to me because of the way that they built the team was very different than what I had seen generally in a lot of the other teams that I'd been working with. They took a very intentional approach to fostering team culture and making sure that person by person by person coming into the team, we had a good fit as each new person came into the team with the existing team. And so what it felt like when I was sailing with them was this team where everybody had each other's backs, a team where everybody knew what their roles were and was always acting in the greater good of, what what would make the boat go faster, frankly. And what I saw was I really felt it freed up energy, freed up the energy in the team for people to be able to actually look up and out of the boat and to be more strategic, to be able to bring information back into the boat, into the team. And ultimately, of course, they got the result they wanted. So it was a really amazing working with them. I also worked a lot for America's Cup teams. So America's Cup, for those of you not familiar with yacht racing, is like the Formula One. This is Grand Prix yacht racing, and so these America's Cup teams tended to be much larger, like 100 or more people, and the America's Cup projects went over much longer periods of time, like 3 to 4 years. I spent 16 years trying to win the America's Cup and never did. Got amazingly close a couple of times, but never quite got there. And so, um, I was kind of puzzled by that at the time. Why were some of these teams I worked on with, like the Volvo Ocean Race, amazing, felt really great. And some of these other teams I was working with were so dysfunctional, full of politics, right? And, not really being sure, like, really what people's motives were being at the table. And I didn't have the tools to understand at the time, like why these two different types of teams were so different, why they felt different, why my experience working in them was different, and ultimately, of course, seeing the results, one being successful and others not. So it sent me on this path. It sent me on this path of discovery, of really trying to figure out, like, how do we bring a large number of people together into a high performing team and working for the greater good. So then fast forward to today, is that the sort of, as I've been on this journey, there's a book that's just been released called People Dare to Build an Intentional Culture from EOS Worldwide, containing a lot of the lessons, across our EOS community. And I found this amazing quote in this book that really kind of tied things together for me, from Anise Kavanaugh. So she said, when we focus on the intention and being and how people show up together, then the doing becomes much easier. We don't have to work so hard in the first place. And so it's the intentions that people hold, the energy they bring into the room and how alive they feel that makes those differences, right? And so when I saw this, like, I immediately, like those two sailing experiences I talked with you about, it's like, yes, that completely explains why one team, like, that feeling, the presence of people and why people were there on the boat versus some of these other more dysfunctional teams. What were people's intentions, right? How were they showing up? One of these things that we talk about in our coaching world about how people are showing up is, how do you sort of see the world, right? Do you show up with abundance, right, in your heart, or do you show up seeing scarcity out there, right? And I'm going to talk more about this in a moment, but the energy that people are bringing into the team really makes a difference. And what I sort of really saw, perhaps now looking back in hindsight with these larger America's Cup teams, is, the well-funded ones, they would just go and get all of, like, the top shelf people from all around the world, the best sailors, or, Olympic class gold medalists, best boat builders, us as designers. Putting everybody in a room on that basis didn't really mean that everybody was going to work together cohesively, right? Because they didn't really focus on building the culture and really seeing, why were people there? And, one team in particular I worked with, they would never really kind of settle in on, like, who was going to be the skipper of the boat. And, for some of these people, that matters a lot to them. And so not knowing, not being sure about where your place was on the team really sort of created more of a political environment than one where everybody was aligned and helping the team move forward. So, when we have what we call an EOS, one vision, one voice, one team, I see how that helps us move forward successfully. When we have politics showing up, the division of that, not being united, then I see the result that comes from that. So another coach in the community that I'm in had this very interesting insight as well. Many people go around building lists of things they want to do, but very few address their operating system and the way they show up in the world. So in EOS, we talk about healthy and smart. Also, that's a subject that comes from Patrick Lencioni, who's a very famous and business author. So, smart is about building lists of things to do, right? It's putting, CRMs into business and all of the other systems and ways that a business team works together. But as Sanika's pointed out, and the work that I do with teams, very few people address how we're showing up on that team, right? What are our intentions? What's the energy? What are we bringing into the team? So that's what I've been focusing on more and more with the work that I have been doing. So moving from sailing, then I want to come into what we're learning on the farm, right? To move from the sea to the land and then literally start getting down into the dirt. The lessons that this farm here is connecting for us. So starting off with bare dirt. When we first arrived here, we bought this property in December of 2021. So it's, middle of Colorado winter and there's just bare dirt everywhere. The previous people who had used the farm had just upped and left a lot of mess behind and a lot of bare dirt. In springtime, weeds started coming up, of course. And so we were very dismayed by this and, it's really starting to figure out, like, how do we deal with all of these weeds? And so one of the things that we're doing here on the farm is that we're using the permaculture philosophy as to how we are planting out this farm and managing it. And one of the things about permaculture is really kind of one of these first principles is observe, right? Observe the environment, observe what's going on, and see what the environment is teaching you. And so we have really, like, the first lesson we're sort of really learning from weeds is that weeds are pioneer plants. So when there is bare dirt, the weeds are actually the plants that do get in there and they start sending their roots down and they do start breaking up the dirt and starting to create some life there from which other things can come. And so part of really just seeing that as a mindset of, like, not trying to scorch all the weeds and heaven forbid spray them. With the more traditional farmers around us wanting to walk in with the Roundup and get rid of weeds. No, we're going to figure out how we work with them and what we do with weeds in a more sustainable and regenerative way. And so one of the things that we've learned is that when we cultivate healthy plants, they can actually overtake the weeds very quickly. So this is a picture of alfalfa in springtime. And so what we see is very quickly an alfalfa plant can grow, 3 to 4 inches above the ground and then starts filling in, and then it starts crowding out the bindweed, the unhealthy weeds that we've seen there. And so why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you this because there are some very interesting parallels between what I've learned with this and what goes on in our mind and our thoughts. And I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. So the farm lesson number 1 is to nurture healthy plants, right? When we nurture healthy plants, we can drown out the weeds. And as I say, I'm going to connect this with the coaching work that I do. So then lesson number 2 is weather. Weather is a constant challenge on a farm. We do sharecropping with a fourth generation Coloradan farmer, one of our neighbors, and talking with him about, this subject, he's like, yep, farmers are never happy. Never happy. It's always too hot, too cold, not enough rain, too much rain, and so a farmer is never happy. And of course, as a business coach, That's a challenge for me. What do you mean never happy? Come on. That doesn't sound like a great life. But in Colorado, it's a challenge. We do have these blazing hot summers. It's going to be about 100 degrees outside today. We actually have wildfires that are about 5 miles away from us. And a couple of days ago, we were very concerned if they were going to head in our direction. And it's when I woke up this morning, like the house smelled like, we'd had a campfire going. It was full of smoke. It's not doing too bad at the moment, but it was certainly a concern. Around here where we live, we get 13 inches of rain for a year. 13 inches a year. We're in a high desert. The place where I come from in New Zealand, we get 27 feet of rain a year. So to only get 1 foot of rain is a challenge. And this picture that I have on the screen, there's a little rain shower and squall in the bottom right-hand corner there. And it always seems to us that the rain's going north of us or the rain's going south of us. And we can very easily get into a victim mindset of what's wrong with us? Why don't we get the rain coming here? But of course, the weather has nothing to do with us. Clouds are going where the clouds want to go. They don't care about us. And so how do we deal with this, right? How do we deal with the fact that the ground's parched, we don't have enough water, and the rain's not coming here? So how we deal with this is I got listened to a talk at the beginning of 2023 from Gino Wickman. Gino Wickman is the person who founded EOS and developed the EOS system 15 or 20 years ago. And he came and talked to us as EOS implementers, our community, about his life's journey and some of the interesting discoveries that he'd been making along the way about personal happiness and freedom. And particularly sort of talking about, in his story, he had founded EOS worldwide, he had built it up, he'd end up selling it, he's made all the money he ever needs in the world, right? As he called it, he rang the bell from a business success standpoint, but he found ultimately after that he was feeling pretty empty inside. That journey of creating the business had sort of left him at a point where, some of his relationships had suffered. He had put up a lot of shields around himself to be this persona of this ultimately successful businessman. So what he talked about with us was some of the things that he had been doing to kind of break through and find more happiness in his life. And he introduced us to a bunch of different books, and particularly these authors, David Hawkins with Letting Go, right? The pathway to surrender, this idea of, we just hold on to a lot of stuff. It can get really heavy holding on to all of this stuff. Like, I have to be a successful business person, businessman, businesswoman. I've got to drive my business forward, right? How people are being who they're being, all of these things. It's a heavy thing to keep holding on to. So David Hawkins talks about this. How do we just let that stuff go? Practices around being able to do that. And then Michael Singer, his whole story of the untethered soul. For those of you who haven't heard of Michael Singer, he started off life just wanting to be in the woods of Florida, meditating and doing yoga. But then he found himself wanting to build a little retreat center. So he did that. And then once people saw he could build things, somebody asked him to build a little house for them. And then he kind of got dragged into, in a way, starting a construction business. And all the time he's talking, he's feeling this resistance. Like, I don't want to run a construction company. But then he had this practice of surrendering to what was in front of him, what the universe was putting in front of him, and letting go of that resistance. And, then he goes and buys himself a personal computer. This is, back in the 1980s, learned how to program it. And a doctor friend asked him if he could write some, medical insurance billing software for his practice, because that sort of thing didn't exist back then. And lo and behold, Michael Singer did it. And Long story short, he's finds himself being the CEO of WebMD, a $3 billion business. And the whole time he's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But then just, okay, this is what's in front of me. I will surrender. I will let go of my resistance, and I will do what the universe has placed in front of me. So wonderful stories. Each of these three books, Living Untethered is his latest one. And I found those very inspirational. And one of the things he talks about is this idea of the weather, right? Like people hold on to ideas about the weather. I don't like summer. It's too hot, right? I don't like winter. It's too cold. It's too windy. And this is one of these things. This is one of the lessons that he uses in his books is, as I was saying before, the weather's got nothing to do with you, right? If you're holding on to having to have the weather be a certain way, you are just setting yourself up for unhappiness. And because it's never going to do, what it is that you want to do. And of course, being here on the farm, that analogy, that story, of course, really hit home for me at a very personal level. And so that was our farm lesson number 2, was we just, we can't take the weather personally, right? We just have to accept it and adapt accordingly. And I think in some, another coach I know sort of really talks about this idea of that there isn't bad weather or good weather. There's just maybe, empowering or disempowering clothing choices, right? Did you, useful clothing choices? Did you make the right clothing choice? Ultimately, right? We can't do anything about the weather. And so, of course, the parallel is in business. There are so many circumstances that are outside of our control in business, nothing to do with us, right? And this is something that I have been working on with myself too, is really kind of seeing some of those things that are outside of my control and then figuring out like what it is that is with my control, and just to surrender and to accept. I don't have to like it, but just accept, what is happening in front of me. Of course, these are simple but not easy concepts that I'm talking about. But the key is so many of these issues are caused by our mindset, right? Like what's going on in our mind. And so for me, I've been very fortunate to work with an amazing coach myself over the last year to unravel what to do about that. So I'll start off with this little phrase, right, which we all hear so often. I don't know if any of you find yourself talking about this yourselves or saying this in your talk track in your head. I'll be happy when, right? I call it the I'll be happy when syndrome. I'll be happy when I get that new job, that pay raise, that new relationship, that new car, right? All of these sorts of things. We'll be happy when it rains, we'll be happy. It's constantly these things that we keep placing our happiness on some external event or thing happening that's outside of us and outside of our control, right? And so when we look at this, we really sort of come into the idea of seeing that I need to, have something, right, in order to be able to do something, in order to be something, right? So when I get that new car, I'm going to be able to go for a drive in the mountains with the top down, and then I'm going to be happy, right? It's really going to be amazing. So what I've learned through wonderful people like Deepak and her and the being community and my own coach is turning this around, right? Reverse engineering have, do, be, because ultimately that's not the way things work. What works more effectively is to start from looking at our results that we want, the things that we would like to have in our lives, to then look at, the things that we need to do, right, in order to be able to have the things that we would like to have. and then ultimately to see, okay, well, our actions, the things that we do in the world, like where do those come from? Well, we do the things that we do in the world, they come from, our thoughts and feelings, right? These are the internal motivations, what goes on inside us. And where these come from is ultimately, who we are being in the world, which, of course, ties back to, um, looking at, particularly in the leadership context, who we are being affects the things that we do, right? And how we show up onto a leadership team and ultimately the success or failure of that team. So drilling into this a little more, there is this idea, and I've really sort of experienced this, action is the sole determinant of performance, right? I'm afraid that I don't believe that you can sit on the couch and eat Doritos and manifest $1 million. I don't think life happens like that. I'm sorry, Katie, I see you're like, damn it. I, to me, and, in the work that I do, the things that we get in life come from the actual actions and activities we're doing, or, of course, on the other side of it, the things we're choosing not to do, right? Also, of course, lead to the consequences in our lives. And so where do our actions come from, right? Our actions are created in one of these three ways. How we see the world, how the world occurs to me. Do we see the world as being full of abundance, right? That there is enough? Or do we come to and see the world as a place of scarcity and there isn't enough, right? Do we see the things that happen out there as things that are being done to us, right? Or do we see the world out there as things that are being done for us, right? What are the gifts that the world is giving to us? And a lot of the work that EPEC does, and I'm starting to do myself, is around, looking at situations that are outside of our control that might be triggering to us and seeing what is the gift in those. And then the second part, how do others occur to me, right? How do we fundamentally see other people? Brene Brown had something, very, I think, important to see that, to talk about this in terms of, do we see that other people are essentially doing their best, right? Or do we think that other people, don't care, aren't doing their best? I travel a lot for my work, and of course, going to airports, getting rental cars, going to hotels, all the time you're interacting with people. And just a couple of weeks ago, a lot of thunderstorms rolling through Colorado. I'm at the airport, the flight's delayed. And somebody's getting very upset at the gate agent about that, and they're losing their cool. But coming from a place of seeing that others are doing their best, like there's lightning outside. Like we can't have people, ground staff out there getting struck by lightning. People are doing their best. Can't control the weather, right? And then lastly, how do I occur to myself, right? How do I see myself? This has always been a big thing for me, as I always, every time I hear maybe, like an adult say like, I'm not creative, or I'm not good at math, these things, I don't know how to cook. I'm not a good cook, right? How do you see yourself is fundamental, right? To then the things that you end up doing, and then obviously the things that you end up having. So ultimately, the language, right? These things, the things that we're saying to us internally are creating the actions that we're doing in the world, right? So where do our thoughts and feelings come from? They're coming from who we're being, they're coming from inside. And so from that aspect, I talk about, we talk about this concept of being. I'll use maybe a slightly different term of talking about an inner stance, right? We always have an inner stance. Some of them, and it's not to say they're good or bad, but some are more empowering, some are more disempowering, some are more useful, some are less useful. So in working with a coaching client of mine, in a stance, we use this analogy of having this well-worn path that she was seeing that her mind went on. So, and a lot of us do this, right? We wake up in the morning and our mind starts going off, off to the races or down this rocky path, worrying about getting the car fixed, paying taxes. But in her case, she was getting very stressed because she had this Monday morning call with her boss, and her boss didn't seem to be very well in control of the way he was showing up. So there was a lot of he would lose his cool, and then that would end up making her very, very stressed. And of course, waking up in the morning knowing you've got this call coming up, it's going to be very stressful. Um, was getting her on this rocky path every morning of being very unhappy about what was going on in her life. So what we're able to do is to work on that, right? To find a better way for her to be able to deal with this call. So starting off with that, you are always have an inner stance. Then the next step is, of course, to notice that, right? To notice our inner stance. And then from that, we can then shift, right? And to choose to shift our inner stance. And that is in many ways like a revolutionary act, right? To be able to see a situation in front of us, to feel our reaction to that, and then to be able to choose a different inner stance, a different place that we're going to be able to come from. This concept, simple as it is has fundamentally changed my life over the last year, right? To be able to apply this to situations, to know that I have a choice, right? And to be able to choose a better inner stance to a situation. And so for my client, we worked to come up with a way, right, that she could shift her inner stance to get off that well-worn, rocky path of stress and worry and get her onto a smoother path with less stress. I'll tell you about how we did that in a moment. Another great quote here, we're talking about action. Taking the first step makes a miracle possible, right? So taking action, taking a first step is along this path of how do we get off that rocky path and how do we get onto a better path. So for me, I took some action a while ago and I hired a coach. I took action, I hired a coach. Right? I had a coach, Mike Kotsis. He's a expert EOS implementer. He's been with Gino since over 15 years. But he's also a true student of this concept of being, of having an inner stance. And I've been working with him for a while, and I really want to give him a shout out because he's been able to help me fundamentally shift my stance on a number of things in my life. Amazing guy. So this whole idea of hiring a coach, right? So Lewis Howes is a professional athlete, now turned professional podcaster and entrepreneur, but he's studied high-performing people, high-performing athletes, and he sees that people, who want to elevate their performance, hire coaches to help them take their game to the next level. So for myself, hiring Mike was what I wanted to do to take myself up to the next level. And I certainly see that in terms of a lot of the work that I do. Then how do I work with Mike? Well, I start off with doing something called a clarity break. So this is something we teach in EOS. It's the simplest tool, one of the simplest tools in EOS, and the hardest one for me to get across to my clients and get them to do. Taking a clarity break is about going to a coffee shop, getting out of the office, right? Putting the phone away, shutting the laptop, and going and sitting down in an office, in a coffee shop, sitting down with a blank sheet of paper and really just sort of seeing what comes up. Where are you? What's coming up from inside about where you are? And so for me, I look at my energy. How am I doing with my fitness, my sleep, my eating, the endless farm work? How am I doing with my work, my clients, my business development, my own growth and learning? And how am I doing with my relationships, my friends, my family? Oh my gosh, I haven't called mum, that sort of thing. And of course, my partner, Kathy. And so typically when I'm working with Mike, this kind of, the little brief shot of like what our sessions are like, I take all these post-it notes of what's going on, we paste it out on a board, and then go through and start looking at what's going on. And part of what Mike helps me do is to take some shifts through putting systems in place to get off of those rocky paths and onto smoother paths. And James Clear in Atomic Habits talks about this concept of you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, right? And I obviously, being an EOS coach, I talked so much about goals, setting goals, achieving goals all the time. Ultimately, what I see in myself and with my clients is having a system you can fall into is a key way to be able to actually achieve your goals. So what are some of the systems that Mike has helped me with? Number one, this is amazing. Blessing. Oh my gosh. Coming from a place of gratitude in my life and blessing and abundance. So there's a book, The Gentle Art of Blessing by Pierre Pradavand, that talks about this whole concept. And, this is not about being religious. This is more about being spiritual. Mike is a very religious person. I respect that in him, but I'm not. But I am spiritual and tapping into this feeling of blessing has been revolutionary for me. So what does it look like? I start off by saying, verbally creating language, I bless this day in all its abundance for all the good that is the fabric of the universe available to us, one and all. And I bless this day for all the lessons it's going to bring me, that I might progress and grow, right? And then I bless Kathy. I bless her for her wonderful presence. Kathy's my partner, her wonderful presence, her smile, her love, choosing to be with me. And then I bless myself for getting up every morning and choosing to shift my being to be a revolutionary in my life. And so what I'm doing with this is I'm putting a system in place that sets my inner stance for how I see the world, right? It's full of abundance. How I see others, they're amazing, full of love. And how I see myself, well, I see myself as just a student getting up every morning, choosing that I can shift who I'm being, right? And this really helps me be able to crowd out, right? All of those weedy, non-useful thoughts with more empowering, more productive, more useful thoughts. So this is where I connect that analogy of from the farm. The second system that I've put in place with Mike is a scorecard. And so scorecards is another thing we teach in EOS, which is, like how are we measuring progress? What are the measurables, the activities that we're doing in EOS? So after a clarity break, though, I was really kind of talking through like some of my business stuff was going, and Mike was writing down, listening to my language and rushing. Like he was hearing me talk about rushing and being worried about the status quo and being exhausted because I travel so much and tired, and I had some back pain at a stage and I'm not exercising enough. He was writing all of this stuff down, and seeing ultimately that I was coming from a place of this idea of rushing and developing my business was something that was heavy that I was having to do. So he was able to see that blind spot that I had around, how I was measuring my progress. And so we had this aha of developing a fundamentally different scorecard. What he helped me shift is to go from seeing business development, let's say, as this, heavy thing I've got to drag myself through. And instead, what would serve my business today in a way that's more playful, fun, and light? This is a system that I use. I start every day, I write this down. And, you know, those 5 bullet points on the list may be the same things. I still got to get my taxes done. I still got to, you know, all of these things. But when I come from a place of seeing it as being playful, fun, and light, it changes everything. Somebody ghosts me. Well, okay, let's figure out. I'll give it a couple of weeks and see if I can get in touch with them again. It's a game, right? Versus I used to find those things, they used to drive me up the wall. And so I love this quote from my dear Epik: speak your day into creation and see it happen. This is what we do. This is what I do every single day, using language to be able to speak my day into creation. And I promise you that this works. And my client, with her Monday calls, right, we were able to put a system in place how she was able to speak through and use language about how she saw herself, how she saw her boss, how she saw the world, that has fundamentally allowed her to shift her response to this very stressful call. Now she's cool, she's calm, she's less stressed, because she speaks her day into creation every day and she sees it happen. So, as a conclusion here, you know, the core principle here, you always have an inner stance as a leader, right? To take the introspective approach, to be able to see, like you have, right? You can see your inner stance, and then to know that you can shift your stance as a leader. That is the revolutionary concept that, as I said, has really fundamentally changed my life. And as a last quote here from Seneca Street again, we are revolutionaries simply, powerfully, because we are choosing to shift who we choose to be. And you can do that. So, and bring this to a close, if anything has resonated, if what I've been talking about has resonated with you today, I would love to create the possibility of a shift for you. I'm offering, you know, a 1-hour coaching call. Get scheduled through just emailing me, steve@stevemorriscoaching.com. That call is going to be just completely devoted to you and what you want, and what's going on with you in your life. And then it's not going to be about selling you, you know, coaching package or anything like that. You know, if you want to discuss something like that, you know, we'll have the opportunity to set something up later. But I'm truly focused on being of service. So with that, it is 11:58, and I'm going to bring this to a close. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much, Steve. It was really amazing.
Thank
I
you.
loved it.
All right. Thank you for all the work you've been doing, Epik. I really appreciate you.
And you too. You too. Thank you.
All right. Well, Katie, David, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Steve.
Sticking it through to the end. And I'll follow up with you guys later. Have an awesome weekend.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye-bye
Thanks.
now. Bye.
Adios. Bye-bye.